You've all heard the rumors of the Anvon Estate, a ruined old piece of land that allegedly drives men mad and mutates them into horrific monstrosities. The Guild of Dungeoneering has hired you to go into the depths of this wretched place and put an end to this foul magic once and for all. You've arrived and made camp outside of the estate, and amidst the dead trees and the unkept mess of grass, you see the broken down manor house, the dilapidated mines, and the abandoned chapel resting in the middle of this grove of death and decay. That was the message that started my biggest and most lethal campaign yet, the Anvon Estate, which totally wasn't a ripoff of Darkest Dungeon. Yep, 100%. Completely original. Yep. It was a Western Marches campaign, which means that there was around 10 players in the game, and each session would consist of 4 of them going into the estate to explore whatever section they decided to check out that session. The first location in the estate that the players investigated was the old abandoned chapel in the east end of the estate. The large wooden door leading into the main room slowly creaked open, revealing a large expansive room with many wooden pews, and in the front is a partially destroyed statue of a paladin. Corpses were strewn about the room, and written in blood on the wall it says, "All will fall beneath the gaze of the all-seeing one." The party began to go towards the doors on the far end of the room, but all of the corpses came to life and began to attack the party. It wasn't looking good for the players because there were 12 zombies and only 4 players. So naturally, 3 of the players fled and left the last player behind to die. However, the player that was left behind was playing as a cleric, and they were able to cast a 3-action heal, meaning that there was a 15-foot circle of healing around him, and since healing damages undead, he was able to kill all 12 zombies with a single spell slot. The party continued further into the dungeon, killing some ghouls and other undead in the crypts underneath, when they came across a journal written by the leader of the temple. The party locked the door behind them so nothing could sneak up on them, and they began to read the journal. The journal described how the priests of the temple were excavating space underneath the building, when they came across a coffin with an amethyst skull inside of it. Then people began to see a dark figure stalk them from the shadows, and eventually the author of the journal saw the figure too. The author suddenly stopped talking about the figure and began to write about planning a human sacrifice and how he wished to appease something known as the one who dreams in the dark abyss. The last page of the journal is splattered with blood, and hastily scrawled on the page it says, "The skull was not just a relic, it was a key." Well, that's not ominous at all. I think we should leave now. The door's locked. We're all gonna die. Hey Sapphire, you should go outside to see if it's hungry. Eventually they realized that they were the people that had locked the door, and they returned to their camp. During the next journey into the chapel, the party went deeper into the underground section, and eventually came across a small bathroom. I think I'm gonna go take a piss. You guys stay out here and watch for any undead that try to sneak up on us. When the player went into the bathroom, he got ambushed by 4 ghouls that were in the stalls, and the rest of the party rushed into the room to help him out. During the fight, the player that was holding the only torch tossed it to the side to draw his bow, and because of an unlucky roll, the torch went straight into a basin of water, and the entire room was plunged into darkness. The combat music cut out, and the party could faintly hear breathing coming from the hallway behind them. Someone turn on a fucking light! Another player cast dancing lights and the combat music resumed. The fight was fast and brutal, and the ghouls slaughtered one of the player characters during it. What was that when the lights went out? I don't know, and I don't ever want to find out. Here's a new rule. We always have multiple light sources, and we never turn out the fucking lights. The party delved back into the chapel once again, and in one of the rooms they found a hole that led down into a prison cell on the floor below them. One of the party members stayed above to hold the rope while the others climbed down into the cell. The door out of the cell was unlocked, and Cato the lizard folk opened it, but he didn't see anything suspicious, so he looked up to the last party member and shouted. However, something in the darkness heard Cato's shout and began approaching. They saw a giant rotting corpse step out of the shadows towards the cell door, wielding one of its torn-off arms like a club. Luckily for the party, it was too large to fit through the small cell door, but unluckily for the party, it could still reach in and attack them. The players began to try to fight it, but quickly realized that they were barely able to damage it, so they turned and began to climb up the rope. Cato was the last one to begin to climb up, but both he and the person holding the rope rolled natural ones, so Cato pulled Cicero the elf down into the pit with him. It was then the giant zombie's turn, and with a single attack he crushed Cato into paste on the floor. On Cicero's turn, he threw one end of the rope back up to the rest of the party and climbed up, escaping from the giant zombie. The remaining members of the party decided that they wanted to continue delving into the dungeon through a door connected to the room with the pit. However, they decided that they wanted to try to be tactical this time. They used barrels to create makeshift barricades and poured grease on the ground from the door to the pit, in the hopes that whatever creatures lurked behind the door would slip on the grease and fall into the pit, where the grease could be lit on fire, incinerating them. The party opened the door, and at first it looks like their plan was working, with 4 zombies slipping and falling into the pit. But then a few of the zombies didn't slip, and began attacking Cicero. He tried to flee, but he slipped on the grease and fell into the pit with the 4 zombies. Sapphire, the goblin sorcerer, decided to light all of the grease in the room on fire while Cicero was lying in the pit full of grease. Sapphire fled from the chapel, meanwhile Cicero's screams of pain echoed behind him. At this point, the players were very scared of the chapel, so they decided to explore the manor next. They walked through the large oak door and saw an expansive foyer with an eerie golden statue of a knight looming over them from the balcony above. While the gnome druid was walking through the middle of the room, the rotted floorboards fell out beneath him, dropping him into a wine cellar. It was at this point that a door on the balcony opened above them and a patrol of 2 undead archers entered. The guards instantly spotted the 3 players that were standing in the room and attacked them. The combat was fast and brutal, with the party managing to come out of it with no casualties, but there were a few very close calls. Once the party managed to finish healing their wounded and they got the druid out of the pit, they began to hear another patrol approaching. "Shit, everyone hide!" Everyone sprinted to cover, and then they turned out all of their lights so they'd be able to hide better, and so they were plunged into darkness. The room was dead silent, other than the occasional clatter of bones as the undead patrol walked into the room. Then the party began to hear a faint breathing behind them. One of the party members felt a cold hand grip their leg and begin to drag them away into the darkness. But he quickly cast a light to see what was lurking in the darkness, but there was nothing there. However, the archers spotted the light and the party got into another combat, though this time not everyone made it out alive, because one of the players was killed with a single arrow by a lucky crit, and the rest of the party decided that they wanted to flee. However, as they were fleeing, 2 of the party members got killed by arrows and the last adventurer walked back alone to their camp outside of the estate. After the mess of an expedition into the manor, a party returned to the chapel to delve further into the depths beneath. After a fairly effective day of adventuring, the party decided to take a rest in the dungeon, so they boarded up the only door to the room they were in and prepared to take a rest. But then Quinn, the half-elf ranger, came up with an idea. "Let's try to turn out all of the lights for a second to see what happens." "That sounds like a cool idea. I'll cast Electric Arc to give us a flash of light in the darkness to see whatever creature it is that has been following us." And so the party turned out all of the lights. The music turned off and they were left in perfect silence. Then they began to faintly hear breathing. Audrey, the gnome wizard, cast Electric Arc, and in a brief flash of light, they saw a dark figure standing behind Quinn, with tendrils of shadow stretching out around it. Then they were plunged into darkness once again. Audrey then tried to quickly cast the light spell, and when the room was filled with light once again, the party saw that where Quinn once stood, there was now just an adventurer's bag sitting on the floor with a splatter of blood next to it.